Hi, my name is Kara Adams, and this week I chose to read an article that's called What Teachers Need to Know to Teach Letter Sounds, Phonemic Awareness, Word Reading, and Phonics. These are all dear and near to my heart. I've taught kindergarten, first, and second, and so I know how valuable all of this is in the classroom and being explicitly taught to our students to help them become really strong readers. I've also taught fifth grade, so I can see the students who have a really strong foundation in these skills, and then students who are still struggling with some of those skills. So the first part of the article talked about clarifying terms. So these are terms that um, we may hear when we're talking about the science of reading. So the smallest letter sound units are called grapheme phoneme units. So you'll see me talk about that throughout the presentation, but a grapheme is one or more letters that symbolizes the phoneme. So the phoneme is the sound. So we have the letter B, and the sound would be B. Um, Grapheme phonemes are the basic units of the writing system. So students have to be able to put a letter and a sound to be able to write. A phonemic awareness, which is so important as a first grade teacher. I used Heggerty to teach this, but it's the ability to focus on, distinguish, separate, and manipulate the phonemes in the word. So we may be deleting the first sound, adding to the first sound, what is the last sound, syllables, etc. Phonics is the instruction done by the teacher to teach the students grapheme phoneme relationships. So this is where students start to take their ability to know the letters and the sounds and put them together to decode and spell words. How to read words. So there are several ways that students are learning to read words as they're growing as readers. So one way is through memory. This would be a student has seen a word many times that every time that they see it, they start to able to read it by memory. So that's something that they've seen multiple times throughout their years of learning. And so then that just becomes a memorization word. Decoding, again, that's taking those letters and sounds together to read a word. Analogy is finding a word that might have the same ending sound and putting it, knowing that that word has the same ending sound as the other word, and then just figuring out the beginning sound or the ending sound. And then predicting, that's just using their context clues in the sentence to help them read the word. Sight word reading. This has been the biggest change in my teaching over the last couple of years of how I teach my sight words to my students. After taking letters, I really changed the way that I approached using the sight words in my classroom. I no longer just stand in the front of the classroom and say the word the, and expect them to know it. So it was interesting to read this in this article too. So studies have found that when graphemes in words are connected to phonemes, they're able to read the words. So really taking the letters and the sounds in the sight words that you want your students to learn and helping them understand the connections in those words. Students take the grapheme phonemes and they decode the words. So like I said, we're no longer standing in front of the classroom and just doing flashcards. We're allowing our students to decode and make the connections of what they know, what letter sounds they know, and putting those together. I would have my students code their words with me. We would use index cards and they would be coding, dotting, finding, the blends, the diagraphs, any spelling patterns that we had been working on. And as the students are doing this, this is allowing their brains to remember it. When they are using the grapheme phonemes to decode, they're mapping it in their brains. So this is called orthographic mapping, allowing their brains to really see the patterns in the words, and then this is helping them to remember the sight words. Phonemic awareness, like I said before, we use Heggerty in my building. K1, 2, and even some third graders, but a phonemic awareness task is when students are manipulating the phonemes in spoken words. So you may say the beginning sound in cat, say the last sound in dog, deleting the beginning sounds, and so on. Teachers need to help the students manipulate their mouths, but this was another thing that through letters training, I became much more aware of teaching my students how to use their mouths to help them manipulate their sounds. So they know that when it was an short vowel or a long vowel, how their mouth was being moved to manipulate those sounds. And I also incorporated like my vowel alley this year, which was so beneficial for my struggling students to be able to look up there and see how their mouth was supposed to be made as they were saying the sound. Decoding instruction. This is when the students turn the graphemes into phonemes and they begin to blend a word. By learning to decode, they're able to start reading words that they never read before. And most students will start with consonant, vowel, consonant words and then begin to gradually increase the difficulty of the word. When we're teaching our students to decode words, we want them to keep we need to teach the students not to break apart the sounds. We want them to kind of keep it all together. When we break the sounds apart, it's harder for them to remember the sounds as they're saying. This is called the phases of development, and I thought this was so important because as teachers, we really need to understand where our students are coming from. I feel like now, before more than ever, we have students coming to us from all different households, incomes, development, who's been to preschool, who hasn't been to preschool, who's had exposure, who hasn't had exposure. So understanding where our students are coming to us and the phase of development that they're in is so important. So the first phase is the pre-alphabetic phase. And this is where children really don't have any knowledge of letters, shapes, or sounds. The instruction that we're teaching them is teaching them their letters, sounds, shapes, phonemic awareness. And so we really want to understand if we have first graders coming to us without knowing any letters or sounds, then that's something that we need to, as a team in your building, come together and decide what kind of tier services are we going to provide that student. Next would be the partial alphabetic phase. Students have learned most of their letter shapes and names. They can begin to read and spell words, and then they're starting to use some of those decodable books, which decodable books are such an amazing resource for our students to really gain the knowledge of the skills that you're working on in your classroom. The full alphabetic phase, students have learned the major grapheme phoneme relationships. They're starting to be able to read the words automatically. And they're starting to remember how to spell words automatically. And then the last phase is the consolidated alphabetic phase. Students have lots of banks of sight words and how the letters and sounds go together. And they're using multi-letter units, which helps them to decode longer words. We need to use these phases of development in our assessing of our students to find out what literacy skills they still need. These phases allows for students to gain knowledge in their sight words and reading them automatically. And then the importance of understanding that our students must grasp the grapheme phoneme relationships to help them with their decoding skills. Some personal takeaways that I had is that students, like I've said before, teachers must assess our students. We have to know what phase of reading they are in when they enter our classrooms and throughout the year. This is something that I've read a couple of times throughout my master's classes, but this is something that I'm just going to remind my staff when we go back in August of these different phases that our students may be coming to us with. Again, I kind of already talked about this, but when my students are learning the sight words, helping them map it out instead of just standing in front of them with a site or with a flashcard. So the letters training helped me become way more aware of this, and then this article kind of so helped me understand it a little bit better too. Phonemic awareness is so important and must be taught to our students daily, which we do through our Heggerty program. And when helping my students decode words, starting with the CVC words or consonant vowel consonant words, and the students must hold the sounds. When students break those sounds apart, they're disrupting the blending process. So it's taking them longer to learn how to blend words. So overall, this article was um, really interesting for me to read. I love all of the knowledge in the primary grades just because that's always been my focus as a teacher over the last 18 years. I do feel like this is something that I can share with my staff as we come back into August, just to remember the different ways that students are reading. Here's my reference from the article, and thank you.